Hey guys,
Hey, Romeos.
how are we doing today?
Very good.
Romeo mood.
Are you going to say it, Aki?
It's a Romeo day. Hola. Hey, our viewers, Romeo day. Nice to have you.
Welcome back. Glad you could join us once again. Remember that we are striving for likes and subscriptions. So anything you can do to help us in that regard, much appreciated.
Yeah, we're retired after all. We need it.
We need it. We need your support and encouragement.
There you go.
So guys,
So, what are we talking about today?
there's a crisis going on in the world today I want to discuss with you guys.
Okay.
A mental health crisis.
Oh,
Yes.
you crazy.
Well, yeah, you're not the first to suggest that. But we're not going to make it about me.
Okay.
We're going to speak more generally about this mental health crisis that seems to be impacting society in ways that we haven't experienced before. Just want to get your thoughts on where do you think it stems from?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, what are some of the causal factors? How are we dealing with it? How well are we dealing with it?
So, I disagree with your premise completely.
Okay, go. Go.
So, I don't think it's new. I think we've had mental health issues.
I didn't say it was new.
Yeah.
You're saying?
I think it's reached a level
The intensity.
we haven't seen before.
Oh, so let me tell you why I think that has that's come about, because I think it's quite simple actually, and maybe I'm off, but
Oh, you're off, all right.
I am off. So the reason I believe we're seeing it more is because of the way society has started treating mental health, and the way I think it ties into a wokeism. It ties into all of the things that society has kind of gone to the left on, which is there was a time where we had services and the ability to take people and put them into an institution where they needed help. Now, all of the institutions, all of the mental health institutions that we had have now been, defunct, closed, and shat on, I think. So now you have a bunch of people with mental health issues who have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening in a society where you don't have a place where you can institutionalize people who have mental issues and try to help them, they're all now on the streets because those institutions have all closed. And these people have free access or easy access to drugs and to whatever other things that they want, alcohol, etc. And there's no one out there that's helping them. So we have a mental health crisis, and the reason we have that is because somehow society decided we can't institutionalize anyone because everyone has a right to be free range. Even if they don't have a home, even if they don't have the ability to support themselves, doesn't matter. Let them all out.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Before what you said is correct. But before that, I think we've widened the definition of mental illness way too much. You overeat, it's mental illness. You overdrink, it's mental illness. You like little boys, it's mental illness. Everything is mental illness. And that's a problem. So now we have too many in that definition.
Do you see a difference between mental illness and mental health?
Do I see it?
In other words, if you're not in a healthy state of mind, does that mean you're suffering from mental illness?
What is a
No.
healthy state of mind? What do you define as a healthy state of mind? I've been in crisis most of my life when I think about, finances, when I think about raising kids, when I think about all the stressors that are on humans, whether men, women, families.
Yeah, but
That's always been, but now all
No,
of a
no,
sudden
no.
no one handles these
So,
stressors.
so I would say, I was going to suggest to you that you managed those challenges effectively.
Well, that's debatable, but I managed them
no,
as
but-
best I could.
I don't
Well, effectively from the standpoint that you weren't institutionalized. It didn't cause you to miss work for extended periods of
Right.
time. It didn't cause you to act irrationally and
Well, my ex might have a different view to that one, but anyway. I
so
catch your
she'll have
point.
an opportunity to watch the podcast and weigh in, right? There's an opportunity to comment.
There you go.
But there's a lot of issues why there is mental illness. For example, the breakdown of the family. You have kids who don't have a father or a mother or whatever, and and it leads to a lot of these situations. So there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think we've put too many people into the definition. I don't think if you're overeating, it's mental illness. It's a behavior that's, it's not an illness.
But what's at the root of that behavior?
Well, that's
Well, compulsive obesity is an illness.
Compulsive eating.
Compulsive eating, compulsive obesity, yeah, it's an illness.
What illness?
Well,
behavior.
anything that is compulsive
Yeah.
in nature.
Anything that's compulsive
yeah,
in
but
nature
an
is an illness.
illness. I mean, it's
Okay.
Okay.
Aki?
So to Nuran's point, yes, in terms of the history of it, and we deinstitutionalized, and people were basically they were left to their own means on the streets.
Free range.
It wasn't supposed to be that way. So the idea is institutions, the way it was practiced, we knew and science agreed that this was not the effective way for taking care of people with mental illness. The plan was, and what the logical next step was to make sure that there were resources out in the community to support these people. And those resources were never, in most societies, they were never developed to the necessary degree.
What type of resources?
Social workers,
Social housing.
day centers, family supports are some examples. So those we never developed them to the extent that we needed them. So that's really where we failed. So the idea, the plan, the master plan was a legitimate one, but the execution was completely off mark.
So don't you think that? Don't you think it might have made sense then when people saw that there was a failure of society to have those resources available to the people that needed them, that hey, maybe we should go back and restart those institutions, which actually did keep people off the streets.
But it didn't treat them properly. They weren't treated properly, and they were not. They were not.
Yeah. Okay, but hang on. So you just mentioned the problem. They were not treated properly because maybe they were draconian in terms of the way that these things were managed. So why don't you just fix the way that they're managed and be more open and be more transparent in managing these types of places, but at least have a place where people who have mental issues, who cannot deal with being on their own and take care of themselves, are in a place that can take care of them, as opposed to being out on the streets.
I don't think institutions are the first choice in this equation.
Why not?
Because institutions that we know tend to be inefficient. They tend to be dogmatic. Those are the experiences that we had with
can
them.
you not fix that if you know that that's a problem when you
I think
reset an institution?
I think science, I think psychiatry. There's a consensus that institutions alone are not the answer. The proper way to do this is to have some institutions as well, because they are needed in some respects. But it's more important that for people to be able to have their place in the community, not to be in a silo.
But hang on, you're saying to have a place in the community. If you're an individual who, for whatever number of reasons, your wiring is not the way it should be, and you can't handle these situations, why do you think it's better for them to be in the community? Don't you think it's scary for someone to be in a community when they can't take care of themselves?
There are cases, absolutely, where institution might be the right solution, but institution alone is not the answer.
I'm not going black and white on you. I'm saying that right now, there are no institutions. There's no place to put any of these folks. They've shut everything down.
No, that's not entirely true. There are resources.
Yeah, if you all of a sudden start stabbing someone, they're going to put you in a place. But as long as you're not
Noran, no. There are institutions. There are resources available. I think what's fair to suggest today in our society is that the demand for services and resources far exceeds the available supply. Yeah. That is a fair statement. But to suggest that everything's been shut down, that there are no resources available.
Let's not talk black and white. Yes, it's a gray zone. But I believe that that by and large, the amount of resources required versus the amount that are actually available is minuscule. It's 10 to 1, 20 to 1. So when you have that kind of discrepancy between what's available and what's required, we can all say that it's been a failure. You can just kind of come to the conclusion that this whole thing has been a failure.
We have to understand why. So one of the points I think Dominic made earlier is, first of all, there's a rise. There's a significant rise in demand. So I think it's also important to look at what are some of the causal factors that have caused over the course of, say, a generation or slightly more than a generation for the demand to grow at such an accelerated rate. Because the demand on resources today is far greater than it was a generation ago.
Okay, so is this based on fact or conjecture?
Yeah. No, on fact. On fact.
Okay, so
there are many more young people today, and when I say young people, it could be from early childhood through to early adulthood.
Okay, so
Who are suffering to a far greater extent. And I think, it's important to make the distinction as well, because you talk about wiring, and I think that part of it certainly has to do with the wiring. In other words, we're all conceived and born with a brain that's mapped a certain way versus the nurturing aspect of upbringing.
so that's to
So
Dominic's
I
point,
think-
and I kind of agree with.
I think,
I agree with you.
and I could be wrong, but I think that the way in which our generation brought up their children has contributed to the mental health crisis that we are now experiencing.
Well, let me maybe throw one other
Our
thing in there. So,
Okay.
Yes,
So I kinda-
the way our generation
I agree with
brought
you.
up their children,
Okay,
or our children have been brought up in an environment, for instance,
yeah, where everyone gets a trophy and
you're a
and-
winner,
yeah,
right?
all
and,
that shit.
and you never fail at anything, and so on and so forth. So when life hits you for real, right? When you get
not
off that
equipped.
soccer field, or you leave elementary school, or maybe even high school, and you're confronted with the realities of life, which is you're not a winner, or you're not necessarily a winner.
Very good.
You're not entitled to all these things. You have to earn your way. It creates a level of stress that people today are ill-equipped to deal with and to manage. And so, we've had earlier conversations, perhaps
I know,
offline,
I definitely agree with what you're
right,
saying.
where we talk about issues in various walks of life today, when people are feeling so overwhelmed by events that they go see their family doctor and they immediately get a note that says medical leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm going to add one thing to what you just said, which I think is also a contributing factor,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the idea, or the idea, if you will, that everyone is on a spectrum. So they've all of a sudden taken what used to be pretty narrow in terms of, for example, autism. They've taken that thing and said, oh, no, we're all on a spectrum. It's like gender. We're all on a spectrum. Everything's on a spectrum. So now all of a sudden, anyone who, has a little bit of a attention deficit, or is a little bit hyperactive or whatever, you're on the spectrum. All of a sudden, you've given someone a scapegoating, or you've given someone an escape hatch, if you will, for life, to say, well, you know what? I'm on the spectrum. So, what do you expect from me? Yeah, I'm on the spectrum. I hear that all the time. I mentioned this on a podcast before. You have guys who are stand-up comics in front of 1,000 people telling jokes saying, yeah, I'm on the spectrum. It's like, no, fuck you. You're not on the spectrum. If you're autistic, you're not going to be in front of 1,000 people telling jokes.
So here's one of the issues. And again, I'm not qualified, medically speaking.
Neither am I, but I'll still make that
statement. But I'm going to express an opinion, a strong opinion, which is that medicine is an inexact science to begin with.
Okay.
And the most inexact
Mental
of
health.
all
Yeah.
medical fields is the one that deals with the brain,
100%.
right? We're scratching the surface. We have such little understanding. There's no shortage of theories, and there's no shortage of practices that are put in place to deal with a variety of symptoms without necessarily really understanding what's at the root of the problem. So we're treating a lot of symptoms. So I'll use the example of a young, call it 4, 5, 6-year-old boy who's disruptive in the classroom because he has a lot of energy, and the classroom is just not an ideal setting for him to be able to expand that energy. And so parents are brought in, your child is active, perhaps hyperactive. Have you spoken to your doctor? Yada, yada, yada. And then you have all these 4, 5, 6-year-old kids
On Ritalin.
who are, on Ritalin.
Yeah.
Right. And that tends to be a male related issue.
Okay.
Right. And girls and generally have other issues that they have to deal with, maybe at a slightly later stage. So it could be adolescence, the teenage years, where there are other societal pressures and issues that are coming their way. And you combine that with the growing importance of social media in the lives of everyone,
We forgot about that.
and that becomes a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Right?
So throughout their lives
So,
now. Yeah,
well,
go ahead.
from early childhood,
exactly.
you're told
Exactly.
in school, we don't fail kids anymore,
Yep.
right? We don't fail kids. We don't tell them they're failures because that's going to have a detrimental impact on their lives. Whatever activities, extracurricular activities they participate
They don't
in.
do dodgeball anymore. You don't have dodgeball in high schools
Right.
anymore because it's too violent.
So
What the fuck?
So we're telling everyone you're a winner, and the way we're doing that is by awarding trophies to everyone
Right, and
just
you-
for participating.
But you got to get a ball in your face every once in a while to understand. What
I
life
think
is about.
I think though that just getting back to your point about science, about medicine being an inexact science. You're right, but there are some advances around diagnostics that we have to recognize. So for autism, to your point, where everybody basically can claim to be on the autism spectrum. Well, no, I mean there are like significant proven diagnostics of what autism consists of, and we know that we have more young people who are on the autistic spectrum. Before we didn't have that level of diagnosis, so it was misdiagnosed, and we never really addressed that.
We continue to misdiagnose.
Yeah, but
So I can give you several examples involving individuals who are diagnosed with a certain condition, only to later be told by the way, by a subject matter expert, to only be told a few to several years later by another subject matter expert in the same field, no, that is not the condition you have. You have another condition.
Yeah.
fair enough.
And so misdiagnosis, and I'm not excusing it, but the fact of the matter is we're dealing with something that's so complex
Yeah.
that even the foremost experts in certain fields
Yeah, we'll disagree.
Right, but we do agree. We do agree that it's a significant part of the mental health equation.
Yeah, but
that we
Aki,
do have
what-
more young people who are autistic.
Why?
In our midst.
Well,
I disagree.
Diagnosed.
We don't know. Diagnosed.
Diagnosed.
That's a fair statement.
Diagnosed.
We have more young people
Yeah,
being diagnosed.
Right, because it's to me it's a bit of a relief valve for a doctor to be able to say, okay, well, here are the five things, the five telltale signs or whatever, and your child is a little bit okay, so he's on the spectrum. It's very easy to say when you have something that's not a black and white, when you don't have an on and off switch, when it's like, hey, it's a spectrum. Yeah, he's like 5% autistic or 10% or 20%. They can't be proven wrong. To me, it's just it's a way out for a clinician or for a doctor to make that assessment.
What about for the parents?
Well, it's the same thing for the parents. It's like, so that's what it is. Now we know what it is.
Okay, yeah.
So
I just want to
everyone-
get your perspective.
Everyone wants to understand the reason why, and to me, if we believe that all of a sudden in our society, and I don't know the percentages, but I'm, I should have looked it up before the discussion. But there's got to be, if there's been an increase in the number of autistic people, diagnosed autistic folks in the past 20, 30 years, I think what you need to do is really delve into the severity of what's being treated or what's being diagnosed as autistic. Because 20, 30, 50 years ago, maybe the lower 30% that are being diagnosed now would have just been called hyperactive or shy or whatever.
What you're describing applies to all areas of mental health, right? Not just autism. So you can talk about depression, you can talk about anxiety disorders, you can talk about
You're right.
multiple facets of
Yeah.
areas that pertain to mental health or mental well-being, and your comment would apply. Not just about
Autism is such a small part mental illness.
You have more people in society today
Well, it's
who
because
are
it's a
depressed.
buzzword. That's
Yeah.
why.
No, but you have more people in society today who are depressed. Why are they depressed, right? And it's not a simple answer. You have more people today who are suffering from anxiety. Why is that?
Yeah.
You have more
you
people.
kind of touched on a little bit of that anxiety.
But
in
if you go
itself,
to-
but
Well, social media is a contributing factor for sure. There's no doubt in my
plus
mind.
the way the kids have been raised to be, you're all
absolutely.
winners.
But
and
if
all
you
the
go
rest.
to the original point, why there's so much more now? Why is it more prevalent? You look at burnouts at the office. That's a huge problem.
But what causes burnout?
Exactly, like you said, depression and
Anxiety.
That's a symptom. What causes it?
well,
Well, it's many causes.
It's
One
an
is
inabi-
internal.
but isn't it an
It's
inability
internal
to
and
cope?
external.
To cope,
well,
yeah.
it's internal and external. It's both. So it depends on the person's situation. Maybe their boss is really an asshole.
Well, it's
That's one
inability
part.
to cope.
But the other part is the coping aspect. So
No, but cope.
Yeah.
Your boss can be an asshole.
you cope with it.
You can still manage the situation.
again, there's degrees. Someone, I mean, if everything is in degrees, right? There's nothing black and white in this conversation. So if you don't have the coping mechanisms to begin with, that's one thing. And again, the coping mechanism, you could be up here or down here with your ability to cope with shit. And then your boss can be a real asshole or not so bad.
Okay.
And then somewhere in there, it's just
So, Narayan, we had a podcast a few weeks ago where we talked about how hard life is today in relation to how it's been historically speaking.
which we all disagreed on, I think.
Yeah.
Well, we agreed. I think our consensus around the table
bullshit.
was that life isn't harder
No,
today.
exactly.
Correct.
In fact, it's
Correct.
easier.
But all the people, or most of the people who are suffering from these health issues, mental health issues, will tell you, of course it's harder today.
So-
But how do we explain that there are more people today being diagnosed with mental health issues than ever before, and not just as a function of population increase, overall population increase, right? As a percentage of the overall population, it seems that it's
Well, I think
increasing.
first of all, there's a laziness in the doctors to overdiagnose or quickly diagnose things. That's one thing. So I think there's overdiagnosis.
If there are any doctors watching, we don't discriminate.
I think there's overdiagnoses because it's easy and it's fast and it's quick, and now you
And they're
can
under
just,
pressure.
and you can now prescribe something, and here you go, it's going to be fine. So that's one thing. And then the second thing, it's about, again, that whole spectrum thing. So now you've got a way to overdiagnose because you can say, depression. Yeah, you're depressed. Here, I don't know what anxiety pills or depression pills you get, but whatever. Here are some pills. Here's something. Let's see if that works for you. So I think that's what's happening.
So, guys,
in terms of
are
the
we-
amount of
are we aware of any cultures, any societies today, elsewhere in the world, where the issues are not quite as prevalent? And
Well-
if so, why?
Being Italian, I can tell you, it's not something we talk about
Still.
Because it's taboo.
Even to this day?
to this day.
Because it's taboo, or for other reasons.
I think our attitude has always been, look, snap out of it.
yeah.
You know? Well, I mean, that's,
Look,
I think it's too easy today to say, I've got a mental illness. It's too easy. You know, you see it at work, the office, burnouts, and here, left, and I don't know. Being Italian, it's something we never talked about. There must have been people with mental illness, but, you know, our principle or our, just step
That's-
out of
yeah,
it.
So do you think it's cultural in part?
I think so. Yeah. To some extent, like everything else. It's your upbringing, your values, your family.
Well, no, it's an interesting thought because I know, for instance, that in Japan,
Yeah.
not that I'm a subject matter expert, but in Japan, incidence of suicide amongst young people is extremely high, right? And many have suggested that's cultural. Why? Because of the standards of performance that are expected. And one of the ways that young Japanese kids deal with it is they take their lives rather than having to live with,
The shame.
being unable, being unable to meet the expectations of parents and others.
And I just want to say that, speaking from personal experience, I have worked with people and I've helped people, and there's no question in my mind that they are suffering from mental illness. It comes from very dysfunctional family environments. It comes from low self-esteem. It comes with an extreme compulsive bend. So these are, and I can understand why doctors, we know the diagnosis, and I concur completely. When you sit down with them and you try to work with them and you talk to them and you try to help them, so there is there is the case to be made that there are there's a significant segment, especially among young people, who I would say unquestionably are dealing with mental illness.
So I don't think any of us are debating that. So
Yeah.
I think that what's interesting is so let's park that, because if we can agree that whether it's the highest incidence we've ever seen, I don't know. There's a very high incidence
Right.
of people suffering from mental health issues.
Okay.
And it's relatively easy to recognize certain symptoms and to attribute them to mental health issues. But what are the causal factors?
Okay.
Because if we don't understand the causal factors, I'm not quite sure how we go about
So
addressing it.
part of it is there's been a change in the family setting in terms of families.
Dominic's point.
To Dominic's point, families I think are under more stress. Too many families do fall apart. And one of the observations that I make is that you see this like in young people, especially if you look at elementary school students, you see the kids that already are going through a rough time. and you understand that something's not right in their lives. They don't have certain supports, and we don't do anything about that. We don't have the ability to address that when we see it, when we spot it early on, to be able to help promptly and to prevent things from getting out of hand. So what happens is a lot of people, the situation does get out of hand because that initial care is never there, and the situation deteriorates as they grow older. So that's definitely an issue. I mean, in our particular area, try, if a young person looking for a psychiatrist or for a psychologist, good luck finding one for young people who are in crisis. So these gaps, in our care system are really aggravating the problem. Social media, I can't understate that enough. I think we can't understate that enough. Social media is such a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
Because it sets impossible standards.
Right. I mean, even for us, when we were young people, I don't know, but I didn't have, I've been in situations where I wasn't treated properly, I was bullied, and so forth. So I can only imagine, like, if I also, had this like amplified, like 24 hours a day, what that, the kind of, the kind of hits that I would be taking and how I would deal with that as a young person. Yeah. So, take that, right, and just expand it across our society, and you understand, that we have like a real volcano here.
So one of the things that's interesting to me is that, we can all think of situations, whether they pertain to ourselves or friends we had growing up, where they found themselves, it could be at school or as part of a sports team, whatever, and they were subjected to abuse from peers. So, similar age kids who went after you for whatever reason. You got a big nose, this is your heritage, you're not talented, whatever it is, right? You're overweight.
Yeah.
With social media, the part that I really struggle with is the degree to which people expose themselves. Because when you were in a classroom or you're in a sports team, you're physically there and people are coming at you and there's not much you can do to distance yourself. But social media, I don't have to partake. I don't have to go looking for the conflict.
Yeah,
and
that's tough though, because every one of their friends is on there.
They'll get stigmatized.
If
you're not part of that community.
If you're not part of it, then it's like, hey, you're not on Snapchat.
Those are their friends?
Well, those are their friends. I mean,
those are the standards today.
Those are the people that they hang out with. So if you're not on,
we should start
on
with
Instagram, on
what
TikTok,
is a friend?
Well, that's another discussion point we can have on a different podcast.
Absolutely. And what role are the parents playing?
Well,
and I'm not talking about a teenager where it's a lot more difficult for a parent to control and manage
that's how
the situation.
It starts, right? It starts at 10, 11, 12 years old. And
I
then
think it's starting
going
earlier than that.
The parents are on social media as well.
Yeah.
Wasting their time there.
Yeah, and they're also buying smartphones for their kids way too young. So, I mean, parents have to also take a responsibility. You mentioned this earlier as well with respect to, and you did as well, single family homes, people that are raising their kids with devices. Here's your iPad, go amuse yourself for the next 7 hours because I'm going to have myself a couple of glasses of wine and chill with my friends. I'm not saying every parent's like that, obviously, but, there's enough of that where we've got... this issue.
Yeah. Can I let me just put something else out there. Suicide rates, especially among young people, are through the roof, right?
Yeah.
I just want to see what you guys think about this. Have we reached a point where for young people in their young minds, because the place of gaming in their lives and social media has the sense of death kind of, it's become almost normal that not to be afraid of death. Like whether I live or I die, nothing really changes.
Yes.
I'm scared that this is the mentality now that we're dealing with.
I don't think it's that as much as young people reaching a point in their lives, young lives, where there's such despair. There's not an ounce of optimism or hope left in them at an early age, and they think that the best solution to whatever it is that's eating at them is to simply no longer be of this world.
But it doesn't occur to them. I mean, we had a sense of, we do have a sense of, I think, death is still something, that.
Okay, but I know the explanation to that.
Yeah.
Because in the game, there's a reset button. And they think life has that too.
Is that the level we've reached?
I don't
I
think
think
so.
so.
I think to your
that's
point, Pat.
simplistic.
I think I think the calculation in young people, those people, young people who are suffering and who are dealing with mental health issues, I think the calculation in their mind is death is like it's. I'm not afraid of it. It's okay. Given everything that I'm facing with, death can't be worse.
No, exactly. It's you know what? I'm undergoing so much pain and suffering that death is preferable. Not being
That's
here is
what
preferable
concerns
to
me.
the pain.
That conclusion
But
really.
that's what suicide is.
But that's a conclusion. But among young people, I mean, I don't know. Where is the pushback on that?
Well, he
to
said
say
hope
to
and
say,
despair, or
I know,
lack
but
of-
you're not. But yeah, I know. But this is. I think this is the conversation that has to happen. Is that we have to diminish that sense of despair. We have to make sure that young people in that situation are not isolated. We have to that they understand they're not alone.
Yeah,
So
but
You got to remind yourself that if a young person, and it doesn't only apply to young people, but if a young person in particular has reached that stage, that point, in spite of being members of a family, right, being members of a group of friends, you've almost, and I'm not going to say it's too late because it's never too late. But if the people in your life who should be constantly reminding you that you should have hope and you should be enthusiastic about the future,
And that you have purpose.
regardless of how challenging life seems to be, that tomorrow's going to bring something better, and if not tomorrow, the day after, right? And part of it is within your control. Part of it is not. Part of it is within your control. And so if we channel our energies and we set the stage for you to have a better day tomorrow than you had today, and so on and so forth, not to suggest there aren't going to be any setbacks, but you embark on a journey of improvement and betterment. If they're at a point where they're not seeing that, and you think that in that moment where they decide, I'm going to end it, you're going to come up with all the right arguments to change their perspective.
I don't know. That's the only thing we have to offer.
It's late in the but this is where I think that when you reach that crisis point, if you don't have the availability of professional resources in order to assist in the recovery program,
That's a part of it.
that's a dark day.
So you've said this a couple of times now. The first one was about the homeless crisis and mental health crisis in general, about having to have resources out on the streets. So I think we have to come to terms with the fact that we don't have those resources. As a society, we don't have the means to fund the resources that we need to do all of these things, whether it be for young people who may be thinking,
I don't
who have
agree.
despair.
I don't agree.
Hang
I think we do have.
So hang on, let me finish the thought. The reason why I'm saying that is okay. So I'm not talking about it in theory. I'm talking about it in practice. So in theory, I think I understand where you're getting at, where, we could do this, but in practice, we're not. And the reason we're not is because there isn't enough funding. And I don't think that in the near future, or perhaps any time in the future, that's actually going to change. So from a pragmatic perspective, I look at the way things are happening now, and if I tell myself we are not going to change the funding model in such a way that it's going to make more than just a little bit of a difference, then how in the hell are we going to solve this problem? Because we're not going to throw money at it, we're not going to throw resources at it, and without money and resources, we're not going to have the help required at street level to do the things that need to get done. So how is anything going to get better?
It's not just about.
It's going to get better.
How?
Through reforms, because I don't know that any of us can come close to estimating the sheer dollars that are spent by various levels of government and by insurance companies dealing with mental health issues.
The consequences of it.
No, not just the consequences, right? The overall management of treatment.
Yeah,
and
but
so
we're not
on.
in a bubble. We're existing now in a world
No, but
that's gotten to this point with all of those things that you're just talking about.
But when I talk about reforms, it's changing the programs and processes through which funds are allocated, funds are utilized.
Yeah, but Pat, you understand
structure. No,
the process is better than most.
It's a monumental
Exactly.
undertaking. It doesn't.
Do you
mean
think
that
that's going to
it
get
doesn't-
done?
Well, it's up to us.
I think it has to get done.
Okay, those are nice words.
No, it has to get done. But it's like other things we've discussed in the past, where if we just, choose to throw our hands up in the air and say, this is the way it is, it's never going to improve. And
we're never going to have money.
But
our conversation is geared around in part identifying whether or not there is a better way. And I'm not saying that we're going to get there. There is a better way without necessarily spending more money. I'm talking about reallocating
I agree with
money
you.
that is being spent today.
Pat, I agree with you 1,000%. I agree with you. My issue is the fact that we haven't gotten here in a vacuum. We've gotten here because of the way life is, because of all of the things that have happened in the past has brought us to this point. The reason we're at this point and not at a better point where we have had money allocated and resources allocated is because of all the other pressure points on society to spend money in different places, whether it be for armed forces, whether it be for whatever other
Seniors'
number of things,
pensions,
whatever, 100 million other things that you could spend money on. And we've gotten here based on what we as a society
the
believe
choices
we
we've
should-
made.
Exactly. And I don't think the reason I'm so goddamn pessimistic, and I understand that I'm being pessimistic, is because I don't think there's going to be any driver to change our choices in the future unless something drastic happens.
So-
and I don't know what that drastic thing is.
So there are huge sums of money today being spent by various levels of government, largely out of employment insurance programs and retirement programs, but geared towards dealing with individuals who are suffering from mental health issues. Yeah. On top of that, you have huge sums being spent by insurance companies that are having to compensate for the inability of people suffering from mental health issues
Okay, so
to operate
Perfect.
right in a relatively normal manner.
I'll pause you for 1 second. So you're telling me right now governments are spending a ton of money, insurance companies are spending a ton of money. What's the outcome today?
Well, like a lot of things governments spend on, it's terribly inefficient.
So-
Right. So you're making my point for me, which is
but
these monies are being
But
spent
I'm talking
right
about
now.
reforms. I'm not saying continue doing what you've been doing.
Exactly.
I'm saying we need to reform the programs and processes so that without beginning to look, I wouldn't start by looking at allocating more money and more resources. I would look at reallocating money and resources in a way that's going to drive better outcomes than we have currently.
So, and even in our current context, there are successes. There are successes. There are programs that work very well. There are young people, who are.
But Aki, I'll throw it back at you and say, really, if there's, yes, you're saying out of 1 million or 1,000 programs, there's a handful that, or 10 or 20
More than
or
a
30,
handful.
whatever number. But my point is, as an aggregate,
Right.
our society is where we're at now, and we started
no,
this by
you're-
saying,
But what are the choices? So I'm throwing
You're
it back
right.
to you.
The situation is actually worsening, which demonstrates that the existing programs are not being as effective as they need to be.
we're in violent agreement.
So what are you? So,
I just don't believe it's
So
gonna
what are you
change.
advocating? So Narendra, what do you want to see then? So you've made the statement that we don't have enough resources. What are we going to do? So what are you advocating?
Well, what am I advocating? I agree with what Pat said. Foundationally, he's correct. He's 100% correct, where that's the right way to deal with it. I'm just saying I don't think that's ever going to happen. And the reason I'm saying that is because we got here based on all of the things that were tried in the past with all the other factors that have been coming, that have been focusing our society on the issues that we want to spend on, and we've gotten to this point. And I don't think, unless there's something that drastically changes, that we're going to be changing as a society the way we're dealing with things.
But those are choices that we can make as members of the society, as families, who have people who have the experience of dealing with severe mental illness in the family.
I'm just very pessimistic.
This is what we have to do.
And don't underestimate the role that the private sector may play going forward, because businesses are being severely impacted by a level of absenteeism
Huge.
that is the direct result of people suffering from mental health issues, and because of those are incapable of working or working normally. It's costing them a fortune. And so I think it's another situation, another example of where private and public are going to have to get together in order to discuss various strategies that could drive better outcomes than whatever it is we're doing today. Because what we're doing today clearly is not as effective.
Can I throw a crazy idea out there?
Please.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, there you go. In order to reduce the number of cases, should we start monitoring the kids at a young age?
Monitoring what?
Well, their behavior assess.
Whose responsibility is that?
Well, they do
Well,
that now in primary school. I mean,
yeah,
the kids, the
Should.
teachers
we
do
should.
that.
We need to do more
the
of that.
teachers themselves are
I
overwhelmed.
think they're
Social,
overwhelmed.
you need to have like counselors, specialized trained people
Exactly.
in the schools. That's what we're missing. That can actually spot these situations
Exactly.
and deal with them.
That's a good
totally.
idea.
That's a very valid point. That's not outrageous. You
Yeah, but,
disappointed us.
guys,
Not
guys,
as crazy as we were expecting. I'm very
Guys,
But I
guys.
like the point that Pat made.
If parents themselves are not seeing the
Exactly.
telltale signs,
yeah, but we
how
can't.
likely is it that a counselor?
well, you-
Actually, it's very likely. Actually,
very
I'll
likely.
disagree
You know what,
with you on
Pat?
that. I'll
We
disagree
can't
with you.
count on parents anymore.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with you on that.
Well, you can't count on parents, but you can count on counselors.
Well,
Sometimes, yes.
Because they don't have.
Sometimes.
Because
I'm
they're-
talking about.
They're more objective.
Exactly.
That's the
You know,
point.
Exactly.
I mean,
And they have the training.
And that's a good first step. I kind of like that.
but
idea.
but it's very touchy.
No, it's very
Who's
important.
responsible for that? That's
Well, in the end, the parent is always
yeah,
responsible.
I know. But
Yeah, you don't exclude the
But I
parents.
think if at school they see some
Yes.
behaviors,
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
you know, there should be a guidance counselor or
That's what I take away from my work. Exactly what you're talking about. Because
So what role are those people playing today?
I don't think
There
that
aren't.
role.
There aren't.
Those schools, they don't exist in
They
they
there.
don't
don't
exist.
they don't have special
There are no guidance
counselors.
counselors.
Well,
Maybe
not
in
in
high
primary
school.
school.
Like one counselor for 2 high schools, with
I'm
over
talking-
1,000 students.
Primary school. You want
okay.
you want K to 6, 7 when they're starting out to see if you can find issues. They have lunch programs for kids who are in bad situations financially. They have programs, but I think that would help. I think that's a great
It
suggestion.
will. It's a
But
very.
the teachers are able to observe behavior.
they're overwhelmed.
Yes.
They're overwhelmed.
And they're quitting. They're,
No, because they themselves are suffering from mental health issues.
yeah, that too bad.
Yeah.
It's working in
Yeah.
that environment.
Yeah.
When you've got a classroom of 25
Yeah.
kids and they come
It's not
from,
just the number of kids.
It's a
the
situation.
expectation that have been placed now on
Yeah.
teachers.
But it's also the circumstances of those families. We're talking about kids who come from some very difficult family situations,
single-
who are new
single
arrivals,
family home.
who need so much
Yeah,
attention and support, individual attention and support. And the teacher with 25 students that they're responsible
listen,
for,
they
how
have-
much can they do?
But that shouldn't be the teacher's primary responsibility.
Well,
regardless.
that's why you need.
That's the way it's set up now.
But that's why you need the counselor. And I mean, they have food insecurities. They have all sorts of issues that they have
Absolutely.
to deal with. I think that so as one outcome that would be helpful. I think that's a valid outcome.
Yeah,
that
I know
would
it's
be
very
helpful.
touchy, but I think it's got to start there.
It's not touchy at all. It's very liberal.
I
Good for
actually think
you.
it has to start in the home.
It's very liberal. Don't start pigeonholing him.
I thought
Move on.
It should start at home, but we can't rely on parents anymore. They're sending emails to teachers. Teachers are overwhelmed. They get 20, 50 emails a day from all these parents. They can't handle it because their kids are angels. So it's got to be somebody who's a little more objective than the parents.
Yeah.
So that's one concrete thing I think that the Romeos can get behind.
But it's
I
not
hope,
easy.
Pat.
We'll see.
We'll see. But beyond that, again, I'm very pessimistic on us as a society being able to do anything because unless there's going to be some tipping point, and I don't see a tipping point yet in society.
I think to handle the cases today, you're right. But if we start looking at the younger kids and take them and assess them correctly, then maybe in the long run.
Yeah, the problem has been flagged. I mean, you look at in most major countries now, there are mental health associations, national associations with serious people from all, from different professions, from doctors to teachers to social workers. So it's a huge public policy challenge right now in most developed countries.
It's the money and the resources that are lacking.
Absolutely.
And
And
and to your point, maybe the focus of the money and the resources, need to be better targeted.
Well, which is true of most government-related programs, but I fundamentally believe that to be true in this case.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There are also a number of community organizations that are emerging in order to help individuals and families deal with mental health issues.
Right.
So what else? What else?
And
can we
families,
do
I mean,
as a society?
the social economic context also for families, right? We're living in times when we know that for working people, it's much tougher to keep your head above water. So, both the mother and father, they have to work longer hours. That's a reality as well. So that, when
If there are a mother and father.
if there are a mother and father, or it's a single parent, or what have you. But again, here's another example where the kids, when they're dealing with problems,
so you-
are not getting the kind of support and attention that they could benefit
Well, but
from.
I agree with you to a point, because you say they have to work harder. I think at times it's a choice. What are your priorities? What are your priorities? So people are working harder for what reason? For what purpose?
I think, Pat, I think right now that
It depends on the
that's
job.
shrinking. I mean, for most people, they're obliged to be able to afford the rent, the housing, the roof over their heads.
It depends
That's
on
the
the job,
situation.
and it depends on
So
the,
I
on the
think,
situation.
I think that's overstated. I think we have an inflation problem that is real, that is about 3-4 years old. And we're now conveniently sweeping everything under the cost of living increase when it wasn't an issue until 3-4 years ago for most. Right? I think it's a question of priority. It's because people want to live in bigger places, want to drive fancier
That's
cars,
part of it too.
want to take vacations. And it's like, where does the mental well-being of your children
or
sit
yourself.
sit in relation to?
But let me
all
just
these
give you an
other
example.
considerations?
Especially, let me give you an example of families, new arrivals, especially. They're working hard for all the reasons that we know. They're facing serious socioeconomic challenges. When they don't even understand our system yet, they don't even understand the kind of resources that are available to them. They don't know what to do. When their kid is dealing with serious crisis situations. So those are realities on the ground. That's real living.
What you just said doesn't only apply to recently arrived.
I'm giving you one example. Yeah.
No, people who were born and raised here,
Yeah, I
for the
wouldn't know where
most
to
part,
call.
don't have a
There you
clue
go. There you go.
I
what
wouldn't know where to
resources
go.
are available and how to leverage them.
Let me
My
put a-
mom's 85 years old. I don't know what resources are available for her
There you go.
as
Fair
an older
point.
person.
Fair point.
Let me put out another
If you
crazy
got
idea.
off TikTok for 30
Oh, wait.
seconds and
Dominic has
spent
an-
your time more productively.
Dominic is back with a crazy
Another
idea.
crazy
Don't
idea.
disappoint us this
I
time.
think there's a lot of mental health cases that are not real. They're taking resources.
Well, you did not disappoint.
And take resources from real cases.
So what is
This is genuine
what is
Dominic
a real
crazy.
case versus a fake case?
I'll give you a lot of examples. These burnout work.
Mm-hmm.
That's an easy way to get time off. And you can't assess it. It's like a bad back. How do you assess that?
Okay, Dominic, can I just
Yeah,
jump?
let me finish
Okay,
my point.
sorry.
Okay. One way of eliminating that, group insurance should not cover burnouts.
Okay. So Dominic,
What if they're legitimate?
right? So speaking to
Well-
that point, so what do you say about
Most are not.
what about healthcare professionals? What about nurses? Do you recognize burnout among nurses?
Well, why do you single out a profession?
Yeah,
Burnouts
exactly.
can occur.
No, I'm
to
just giving
anyone
a
and
concrete example just to illustrate the point.
Look,
I think burnout is
it's
a
no
lot more
different.
widespread.
Individuals have different tolerances.
I know, but there's some situations I think healthcare, working front lines, is a particularly draining and weakening
And
situation.
the same is true in education. And the same
Look,
is
Not
true
to the
in
same
elsewhere.
extent as healthcare.
Right now, group insurance costs are huge because of this burnout.
I know, but you have to understand that in big swaths of our economy, they are legitimate.
I don't believe so.
So, well, healthcare is a huge part of our economy, and if you have, a significant proportion of our healthcare workers who are dealing with absolutely
Okay, that's
unattainable job expectations.
Yeah, but that's
So here's, Dominic, there's an issue. The issue is we have a tendency to project. So if you look in the mirror, you see a very resilient person who's probably capable of going through whatever challenge is thrown his way. And the assumption is if I can do it, other people can do it as well. But not everyone is as well equipped as you are. Right?
Pat, the
And
diplomat.
I'm not.
What are we talking about here?
There we go. Pat, the artist at work, ladies and
Mental
gentlemen.
fortitude. Oh, okay.
The artist doing his thing.
And I'm, by the way, I'm not disagreeing with you that there are people who abuse the system. That has always been true and will always be true. Whether that's the majority of people or minority, I believe it's the minority of people.
it's a little bit more.
And part of what I would focus on is finding ways to take individuals who are today ill-equipped to deal with life's challenges, understand why that is, and start grooming people to be more resilient, groom people to be better equipped.
So you want to groom
To
them when
face
they're
these
young? So
challenges.
you're talking about grooming children, right?
Pat, that all makes sense.
Developing children.
That all makes sense. But who's
still
got the
Remember,
time?
the Romeo said this.
Instilling life skills in them
Grooming children.
that will benefit them at every stage of life.
That all makes sense. But who's got time for that?
Shit, the server that you are, Nuran. For
as
the
a-
record.
As a supervisor, you've been a supervisor. You've got.
I don't think it's the responsibility of the supervisor or manager or executive. I think the responsibility starts at home,
Yeah, we're back there,
right?
and
Absolutely.
that's what the problem is.
Well, it's one of the causal factors.
What are the cause?
So how do we get past my pessimism on how we're actually going to get to a point that's better than where we are today? Because we as a society, I think everyone understands that this is a crisis and it's getting worse.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it matters at the end of the day whether you're an optimist or a pessimist.
no, that's just my opinion.
I think what matters is to say, here's a problem, let's confront it. So if there's a problem, identify what the root causes are and address them.
But
Wouldn't it be nice?
I think it's what I said before. The pipeline,
You start with the kids.
you have to start
Yeah.
shutting off the
We start
valve.
off, I think.
Oh, and by the way, it's a generational undertaking.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
there's no let's come up with a
100%.
plan in 3
No,
years the world will be better. It's a
Generation.
generation.
Wouldn't it be nice? So I've got maybe this weird fantasy.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Oh my
I wanna go
God.
there. Wait.
Let me lick my lips. Okay. So I've got this
Stop recording.
I have this-
Remember, the topic is mental health.
Correct. So I have this weird fantasy that, and I've thought
back to
about
that.
this, and I've kind of thought about this a little bit.
I'm
and-
bracing
and
myself.
and I always back out of it, which is to actually go into government to make a difference in society. Now, the reason I would never do it is because I think it's just futile in terms of trying to do this. But I always, in my mind, I've 'cause I think about a bunch of stuff like all of us do, I'm sure. One of the things I've always thought about was, you know what, if you enable and empower one individual who wants to fix a problem, have that person go in to government and come up with a policy that makes sense, a policy that's all encompassing, one that's funded when it comes to funding, when it comes to, who does what, like just a fully, made encapsulated policy for one topic, one thing, mental health, call it mental health across Canada, across the US. One individual comes up, takes 2, 3, 5 years to build that policy, make it bulletproof, but then fucking implement it. If we could do that topic by topic, put someone in charge. By the way, they may come up with the wrong policy, but you implement it and then you fucking adjust. That's what companies do. They put together a policy, they implement it, and if it's not 100% correct or it's off by whatever, they adjust.
You course correct. So are you talking about
That's
an
my fantasy.
appointed role or an elected role?
No, appointed, not elected. You appoint someone and you say, your role is to come up with a policy and we are going to implement it. You empower this individual and say, okay, this one individual with a team, they can build the team that they want, go away for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it's going to take, but fucking implement it and see what happens. And then course correct 5 years later, 6 years later, and do that. Do that for mental health. Do that for homelessness. Do it for a bunch of things, but we don't do that. It's all about infighting. It's all about politics. It's all about garbage, and we never get anywhere.
Because all these major topics, right, are under the umbrella that a minister is responsible for.
Exactly.
And so what are you neutering that minister, or what is the process?
Well, they can work with it, but have one subject
Do you think they
matter
can?
expert. Well, that's, again, my fantasy is that government could work this way. And I know it doesn't. And I understand that it's a fantasy.
But the end result of all of that will be we need more money.
No, because to his point, a lot of money is being spent. So if the guy can actually, or girl or whomever, they can do this, it doesn't matter. Okay? If they can come up with this, then they are fine. I will call them they all day long. Okay? They. Yes.
They.
So, all
But more
bullshit
often than
aside.
not, there's always more money, more money.
No, but that's the way government in practice. This is the way we don't see it, but this is the way. I mean, you have, for example, you have
one individual.
You have
one.
right, but you have deputy ministers.
Not
Because the
committees.
process
Right.
would be we're going to put this out to tender.
No,
Lowest compliant bid will be awarded the business. Right? No, I understand what you're suggesting.
Again, it's a fantasy.
But it's contrary to how government operates.
what-
So in
Correct.
the absence of government reform,
I want it to work like a business.
Naran. So Naran,
In a business, you assign a vice president or a director or whatever. You
here's the
say,
biggest
this is
joke.
your role.
special project.
But here's the biggest joke in government. You do have, this is done constantly in order to assuage, certain voters. You might have special interests who really want to do something about, the environment, what have you. So what governments do, they appoint these special committees headed by, very respected.
They need to empower these committees. They don't empower them.
This is what
That's
they
the
do.
problem.
They get mandates.
Yeah, but it's
they
one
do
of
their
this.
work. Exactly. So what happens is that, it's a political game. That's what happens. Malakia. But the idea and the principle is there, and the way it doesn't work the way you expect it to work. And most of the time, these reports and the work that's done get shelved.
Again, it's my fantasy,
Right.
and I laid it bare for all of you. I apologize.
But this is being done.
All right, guys, complex topic. We heard about Naran's fantasy. Do either one of you have fantasies you want to share, or any other thoughts you want to share
Not
before
on
we
this
wrap this topic
episode.
up?
I'm good. This is an important conversation. I'm very encouraged that's not only happening around this table, but it's a conversation that's really gaining a lot of ground in society.
And we need to.
It's
It's a significant issue.
Well, it means that we all care. Right?
Absolutely.
In the end, foundationally, we all give a shit. We want things to be better for ourselves, our kids' kids. It's just that, unfortunately, I don't see that path forward, and I wish I did, because I would love for things to change and to be better than they are today. I think we all agree.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
On that happy note.
We'll end it on that note.
All right,
Thanks for
guys.
joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, viewers.
Thanks,
Take care.
Ciao.